They heard footsteps approaching. The door creaked open, and there, standing in the doorway, was Brenda, or what was left of her. She was pale, eyes hollow, mouth dripping with a viscous substance. Behind her, a shadow materialized, revealing a figure. A man, draped in tattered clothing, holding an axe. Welcome back to J&M Paranormal. Tonight we bring you more scary stories to fall asleep to. If you like this content, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Hit the like button and leave us a comment below. Now, without further ado, let's get on with the show. In the small, sleepy town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a chilling legend has haunted the locals for decades. The Mothman, a terrifying creature with piercing red eyes and massive wings. Journalist Linda Clark was never one to believe in supernatural phenomena. That was until she was assigned to write a feature article on the Mothman sightings in the area. We'll need photos, interviews, everything, her editor, Paul, told her. Linda set out for Point Pleasant with a mix of excitement and skepticism.
Upon arriving, she began interviewing locals. Each story was more bone-chilling than the last. Finally, she was directed to Mrs. Eleanor Davis, an 87-year-old woman who claimed to have first-hand knowledge of the Mothman.
He's real, Eleanor insisted, her eyes clouded with fear. I've seen him, and I've heard his lament. It's not a sound any human should hear. It's a cry that tells you something terrible is coming. Intrigued, Linda decided to visit the abandoned factory, the supposed epicenter of Mothman sightings. At night, armed with a flashlight and her camera, she cautiously wandered through the ruins, her eyes scanning for any sign of the creature. Just when she thought she'd find nothing, she heard it, a sorrowful wail that shook her to her core. Following the sound, she found herself standing before a large, desolate pond. Suddenly, two red orbs ignited from across the water, and a massive figure emerged from the darkness. Her heart pounding in her chest, Linda raised her camera and snapped a picture. The flash illuminated the creature, its wings stretched out wide, its eyes burning like coals. Before she could react, it let out an agonizing cry and soared into the night sky. Terrified but exhilarated, Linda returned to her hotel room and immediately uploaded the photo to her laptop. But what she saw made her blood run cold. The image showed her own face, contorted in agony and despair. Confused and horrified, Linda received a call from Paul. Linda, there's been a catastrophic flood near the factory. Lives have been lost. You need to cover it now. Suddenly, the pieces clicked into place. The Mothman's lament, Eleanor's warning, and now this disaster. Had she been a witness or something more sinister? Was the Mothman a harbinger of doom or a creature pleading for people to change their ways? As she headed toward the tragic scene, Linda couldn't shake the feeling that she'd become part of a narrative much older and darker than she'd ever imagined. Each flap of the Mothman's wings seemed to echo in her ears, a haunting reminder of a truth she couldn't escape. Sometimes, to uncover the mysteries of the world, you must become part of them, and in doing so, you unleash consequences too dreadful to imagine. The Mothman remained elusive, but its lament continued to haunt the residents of Point Pleasant, a chilling aria of tragedies yet to come. And now, among those who heard it, was Linda Clark, forever marked, forever changed.
Camp Hemlock was supposed to be the epitome of summer fun. a sanctuary of laughter, bonfires, and youthful memories. Or so the brochure said. But by the time Rachel and her 6 friends had arrived, the sky had transformed from vibrant blue to an impenetrable shade of gray, as if the universe was forewarning them of what was to come. "Hey guys, look, we're in cabin 13, Rachel said, holding up the faded piece of paper that displayed their cabin number. 13? Really? Said Mark, rolling his eyes. Let's hope none of us are superstitious. They laughed it off and settled into the cozy, attached cabin that consisted of creaky wooden floors, worn-out beds, and windows that provided more of the view of grime than of the scenic woods outside. That night, they all gathered around the bonfire, the flickering light casting an ethereal glow on their faces. Jeff, the self-proclaimed storyteller of the group, decided to tell them about the legend of Old Man Harlow, a caretaker who had mysteriously vanished years ago after reports of strange, ritualistic behavior. The legend said that he still haunted these woods, seeking revenge. Sounds like a cliché horror movie, said Jenny, rolling her eyes. Well, whether it's true or not, Jeff paused, looking at each of them. They say that every now and then, campers disappear around here. So be careful. By the next morning, Brenda was missing. Her bed was empty, and her belongings were scattered on the floor, as if she'd left in a hurry. Panic surged through the group. We have to find her, Rachel insisted. They split up, delving deeper into the woods. Hours passed, but there was no sign of Brenda. While searching, Rachel stumbled upon an old shack. She froze. In front of her, carved on the wooden door, were the words, "Turn back now." Her cell phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Leave Camp Hemlock. You are all in danger." Night fell once again, darker than before. Back at cabin 13, Rachel shared the mysterious text with the group. "We have to leave. Now," she urged. Just as they began to pack, a guttural scream echoed through the woods. Close. Way too close. They all stopped, eyes wide, hearts pounding. They heard footsteps approaching. The door creaked open, and there, standing in the doorway, was Brenda, or what was left of her. She was pale, eyes hollow, mouth dripping with a viscous substance. Behind her, a shadow materialized, revealing a figure. A man draped in tattered clothing, holding an axe. It was Old Man Harlow, alive or undead. It didn't matter. What mattered was the malevolent glint in his eyes. "Found you," he whispered. The cabin erupted into chaos. Mark lunged for the door, but Harlow was faster. One swift motion of his axe, and Mark crumpled to the floor. Rachel grabbed a fireplace poker and swung it at Harlow. It pierced through him, but he seemed unfazed. He pulled it out and laughed, the chilling sound that seemed to reverberate through time and space. Brenda, now more creature than human, lunged at Jenny, who screamed and dodged, tumbling out the window. Jenny picked herself up and ran, not looking back. She reached the main road just as a police guard drove by. Gasping, she explained what had happened. The police arrived at Camp Hemlock, but cabin 13 was empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Just an eerie silence that hung heavily in the air. As they searched the area, they found a piece of paper near the now extinguished bonfire. On it were scribbled the words, "The legend lives on." The camp was shut down, and the story of that night became a cautionary tale whispered around other campfires. But no one ever found out what really happened to Rachel and her friends. And somewhere, Deep in the woods, a cabin stood empty. Cabin 13, a place where laughter was replaced by screams, where youthful memories were eclipsed by nightmarish realities, and where the legend of Old Man Harlow lived on, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting campers.
On a quiet, peaceful night in the small town of Elmsworth, Sheriff Jane Myers sat in her office reviewing case files. Her peaceful moment was shattered when a deputy burst into her office. "Sheriff, the hospital called. Tom Blackwood escaped." Jane's face turned pale, her eyes narrowing. "How did this happen?" "We're not sure, Mom. They just said he's gone, and they found the 2 guards unconscious." "Alert the town. I want a curfew in place by nightfall. No one goes out after dark," she commanded. Tom Blackwood was no ordinary man. 20 years ago, on Halloween night, he went on a killing spree that left 5 dead on Maple Street. He was captured and sent to a mental institution. The event scarred the community forever. As the sun set, news of Tom Blackwood's escape spread like wildfire. Parents rushed to pick up their children. Stores closed early, and the streets were deserted. At the Smith residence on Maple Street, teenagers Emily and Jake decided they were too old for curfews. "Mom, we're not kids anymore," Emily protested. "I don't care. This is serious, and you're staying inside," her mother, Sarah, retorted. Despite the warnings, Emily and Jake couldn't resist the temptation. They decided to sneak out through the back door. The duo made their way to the abandoned Miller house at the end of Maple Street. According to local legend, it was haunted. "Think Blackwood would hide here?" Jake wondered aloud. "I doubt it," Emily responded. "It's just a dumb story." Just then, they heard footsteps behind them. Turning around, they found nothing. "It's just the wind," Emily reassured. They reached the door of the Miller house, only to find it ajar. "Should we go in?" Jake asked. Before Emily could respond, they heard a chilling whisper. "Turn back." They looked at each other, their faces white with fear. Ignoring the warning, they stepped inside. The interior of the Miller house was as creepy as its reputation. Dusty furniture, broken windows, and dim lighting made for a disturbing atmosphere. Suddenly, a shadow darted across the hallway. Emily and Jake screamed, rushing out of the house. They made it to the yard, gasping for breath, only to find a tall, menacing figure standing near the fence, silhouetted by the moonlight. "It's Blackwood," Jake yelled, terrified. They sprinted back toward their home, the shadowy figure giving chase. Emily and Jake bolted into their house, locking the door behind them. They yelled for their mom. Sarah came rushing down. "What happened?" "Blackwood. He's here," Emily shouted. Before anyone could react, the front door burst open, and Tom Blackwood stepped in, wielding a knife. Sarah screamed, pulling her kids behind her. Just then, a gunshot echoed through the house. Sheriff Jane Myers stood in the doorway, her gun smoking. "Tom Blackwood, your reign of terror ends now," she declared. Blackwood lunged at her, but Jane fired again, this time hitting him squarely in the chest. He fell to the ground, lifeless. The town breathed a sigh of relief. Maple Street was safe again, thanks to Sheriff Jane Myers. As Halloween approached, families decorated their homes, children planned their costumes, and life returned to normal. Yet, the haunting memories remained, a chilling reminder that evil could lurk anywhere, even on the peaceful streets of Elmsworth.
The town of Black Hollow was like any other quiet, rural community, but its tranquility was shattered when a mysterious store opened on Main Street. The shop, named Eternal Novelties, was owned by an elderly woman known only as Madame Lenore. She sold odd, unique items, vintage books, strange trinkets, and above all, peculiar marionettes that seemed too lifelike for comfort. One rainy afternoon, a group of 4 friends, Jack, Emily, Sarah, and Tom, decided to explore the store out of curiosity. Among the items, one marionette caught their eyes, a puppet dressed in 18th century attire, its eyes almost glowing with an inner light. Madame Lenore saw their interest and warned them, "This marionette holds a spirit within. Treat it well and never, ever hang it from its strings after midnight." Thinking it was merely a sales gimmick, Jack decided to buy the marionette. They all laughed it off and headed to Jack's house, planning for a fun-filled movie night. Around midnight, a curious idea popped into Tom's mind. What if we actually hang the puppet just to see what happens? The friends laughed nervously, but the temptation was too great to resist. With hesitant hands, Jack hung the marionette by its strings from the ceiling. They waited for a moment, half expecting something to happen, but nothing did. Relieved yet slightly disappointed, they headed to bed. But as the clock struck 12:30 a.m., the house went eerily silent. The marionette's eyes glowed brighter, and it freed itself from its strings, dropping to the ground with a soft thud. One by one, the marionette visited each room. First, it went to Sarah's room. With a swift, unnatural motion, it lunged at her, its wooden hands tied around her neck. Sarah woke up too late to scream. Her eyes met the glowing eyes of the marionette before everything went black. Emily was next. She woke up feeling a cold draft and turned to see the marionette hovering over her. Paralyzed with fear, she couldn't move as the puppet's wooden hands stretched impossibly wide and smothered her. Hearing the commotion, Jack and Tom woke up. As they stepped into the hallway, they saw the marionette dragging itself down the stairs. It looked up at them, its eyes glowing like red-hot coals. Realizing the terrible mistake they had made, they tried to escape, but it was too late. The marionette lunged at Tom, its wooden arms piercing through him as if he were made of paper. Jack tried to run but slipped and fell. The marionette crawled over to him, and with a final look of malevolent satisfaction, its eyes met his. Then darkness fell. The next morning, the town was abuzz with news of the mysterious deaths. The police were baffled. There was no sign of forced entry, and no evidence to suggest foul play, except for the marionette hanging innocently by its strings in the living room. Madame Lenore arrived at the house as the police were investigating, her eyes filled with sorrow and regret. "I warned them," she said softly, taking the marionette back into her possession. She returned to her shop, placing the marionette back in its glass case. Its eyes glowed briefly, a soft whisper echoing within, "More will come." And so, the town of Black Hollow returned to its seemingly peaceful existence, but a heavy, invisible shroud of dread hung in the air, forever imprinted by the malevolent spirit of a marionette that knew no bounds and left no survivors. And there it ends, a tale of horror, heedless choices, and a malevolent force that left no one alive to tell the story. Always remember, some warnings are best heeded, for ignorance may lead to an eternal night with no dawn. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, share, and turn on notifications. Leave a comment below. And, as always, until next time, stay curious.